In this video, I'm going to show you a really good stretchy bind off. So here I have a toe up sock, and so it's really important with something like a toe up sock or a cuff that you're doing to have a really stretchy bind off. And I really like this one. It's a combination of knitting and pattern and a regular stretchy bind off. So this is what it looks like on this sock. You can see it doesn't flare out that much, but it does have so much stretch. So I'm going to show you how to do this. I have here this little piece of 2x2 ribbing, and the important thing when you're doing a stretchy bind off, how you get a stretchy bind off, what determines what makes a stretchy bind off is how much yarn goes into the bind off, how much yarn goes into the stitches. And so I'm going to show you how to do this one. It's a combination of binding off in pattern, which means you knit the knits, you purl the purls, and a combination of the standard stretchy bind off where you essentially knit every stitch twice. So here's my work. I'm going to knit all the stitches in pattern. So I have a knit stitch first. I have an uneven number of stitches. I'm going to knit that stitch, and then my next stitch is a purl stitch. So I'm going to purl it, just like I would if I was still working my pattern. And now here comes the bind off part. I'm going to put my yarn to the back just to keep it out of the way because this is a purl stitch, and I'm going to knit these two stitches together through the back loop. So I'm just going to put my needle tip into both of those stitches so you can see I'm in the back loop of them, wrap my needle and pull it through, and that's one stitch bound off. And now I'm going to work my next stitch. It's a purl stitch, so I'm going to purl it, move my yarn to the back, and knit these two stitches through the back loop. That's two stitches bound off. I'm going to knit my next stitch. Now my next one is a knit stitch, so I'm going to work it in pattern. It's a knitted stitch, so I get to knit it. And I'm going to bind off the next one by knitting through the back loop. My next stitch is also a knit. I knit it, knit them through the back loop. My next one is a purl. I'm going to purl it, and then I need my yarn at the back, partly because I want to knit these two through the back loop, not purl them, and also partly because it keeps the yarn out of the way and it makes it a lot easier than trying to do it like this. But also I need my yarn back here anyway to do the knit through the back loop. So knit through the back loop. My next one's a purl. Just going to finish binding these off, and you can do this method with any sort of ribbing, whether it's 2x2, 1x1, 3x1, whatever it is, as long as you just knit the stitches in pattern. Knitting in pattern means you work them as they are, knits, purls, whatever it is. So I'm almost at the end here. Okay, so this is what it looks like right off the work. Now you can see it's a little bit more flared because we have a lot more yarn. We've essentially knitted every stitch twice, and even when you go from knitting to purling, there's, each stitch takes up a little bit of yarn, and because we've worked every stitch essentially twice with the knits and purls, the knit through the back loop, we have a lot of yarn in each of these stitches, so that's why it looks a little bit wider, but that also means that it's very stretchy. I can stretch it really wide, and it's a nice stretchy bind off, and you can see it kind of keeps the ribbing very nice. And this is just a little acrylic swatch, but if this were like the cuff of a sweater and stuff, if it were a bit longer, it would keep very nicely, and you won't have to worry about your bind off being too tight after you've bound off, realizing it too late and having to redo it. So that's what it looks like on the swatch, and I'll show you again on the sock. I'll take it off the blocker. Here's my sock, and I use that bind off, and you can see it does flare a little bit. Now this sock has not been blocked. It's just been hanging out on the blocker. But it's a very nice, it's a reliable cast off. I mean, there are a lot of fancy bind offs there that you can put a lot of work and yarn into, but this one is a really great, you want to be sure that you bind off your stitches and they're not going to be too tight. So I really love this bind off, and like I said, you can use it for any type of ribbing, 1x1, 2x2, 3x3, whatever it is. And it creates a very nice, stretchy, reliable bind off.